When I was very small, you know, my first memories were of a pristine lake in a very rural location. The road out front was not that busy. Most of the cottages around the lake were small seasonal camps. Lots of fish of different species were jumping. I mean, it was an extraordinarily beautiful spot. And then it all crashed, and it all fell apart.
It's the pervading factor right here in the lakes region, all right? Lake. If you didn't have any lake, you wouldn't have much.
Coming out of the 50s with a rapid expansion out of World War II, consumerism was on the rise. There's a huge amount of buying and selling going on. Property starts to move in the Lakes region. People start looking for second homes, vacation homes. So coming out of the 50s and going into the 60s, you have this enormous demand for Lakes region properties.
They used to have homes out there that on the waterfront that had one pipe with all the trash going in and the other pipe next to it with the water coming out for drinking.
I was in the real estate business, sold lots of lakefront properties, and I would say that half of the properties at that time, the storage was going into lead.
In the early days, dumping untreated effluent or even some semi-treated effluent into the lakes was on such a small scale that it wasn't causing a problem, but now came all this new development and it was overpowering the system.
For algae, sewage is food. Best kind of food they can get. And you hit any organism or thing like that with food, it's going to multiply.
Every year in the summertime when the weather got warm, they had algae blooms. These algae blooms were nuisance algae blooms. The lake would turn like pea soup. People were getting very irritated about it. Some of the local businessmen, particularly the ones that had motels and relied on tourists, the tourists would come up and say, "We don't want to swim in this stuff, you know."
If you held up a glass of it or cupped it in your hands or something, it looks just like pea soup. Little tiny fine green critters, actually vegetation. And it was thick. And of course, people didn't want to swim in that. You'd come out feeling slimy.
To get rid of the algae, they'd put copper sulfate in the lake. They'd get a bunch of rowboats with outboard motors on them, and they'd put copper sulfate, solid copper sulfate in burlap bags, and they would run up and down the lake in a pattern so that the copper sulfate would dissolve and it would kill the algae. And immediately after they treated it, within a day or so, the lake was, they called it gin clear, because it was clear. The algae immediately died and settled to the bottom.
The decomposition of that algae would rob the water of all the oxygen. So if you get below the thermocline, there was no oxygen below that, and fish couldn't survive.
There was a summer, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a summer in 1969, 70, maybe 71, when all the fish died. And it wasn't as if, well, the fish sort of gradually declined. All at once, all the fish died. And there were thousands of fish washing up on shore and rotting. Thousands of fish. You could walk along the shore, and every step you would take, there would be 3 or 4 fish lying there dead.
When the algae died, it gave off toxins which killed a lot of fish. And he said, but the reason we're having these algae blooms is because of the city of Laconia sewage treatment plant. He says it really needs to be upgraded. It's only primary treatment, so they're just treating the stuff to kill the bacteria.
I was aware of the algae bloom. I went out and looked at it myself, and so I was, there's no question in my mind that it was occurring. However, I wasn't convinced that it was entirely the fault of the city of Laconia.
Well, we got a sewage treatment plant. Why worry about it? We're treating the sewage, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, until they found out that primary sewage treatment was not very much of a treatment at all. Primary sewage treatment was merely allowing the sewage to settle for about 2 hours. The solids would go to the bottom, and the liquids and whatever would float would go to the top. And then they'd put a disinfectant in it, chlorine, and kill whatever bacteria there was in the liquid level in there, and then they dump it into the lake.
The Laconia State School, yes, they had quite a population up there, and I was up there several times, and their sewers, I don't think there was any treatment. A straight shot right in.
And we find that of all the tributaries to the lake, the 2 small discharges from the sewage treatment plants located on the shores of the lake are contributing maybe 0.03% of the total volume of water, yet they contribute about 2/3 of the total phosphorus input from all of the tributaries.
It was all through the water. It wasn't a layer on top like this.
Right, it was.
But yes, the lake looked like that.
Yeah.
What we had to do is work with the community. That's the only thing you can do is work with the community and let them know what's going on. And once you inform the community, things begin to click. Things begin to change.
So you had to get people from all those different areas in and got them speaking with one voice and got them big enough and loud enough so that these different little municipalities would pay attention. So that's what we got to do.
They could see a decline in quality of all the lakes. although we were by far the worst because we got the sewage. But the city of Meredith, the sewage went in the lake too. So that impelled these people to form the organization. I came in several months after they had been formed. I saw a newspaper article about a meeting they had had, and I said to myself, hey, that's for me. I got to get in. And I did.
To be perfectly blunt, they were a gadfly, they were an irritation, they were a pressure point.
I was on the radio 5 days a week. I was on the radio for an hour. I had guests, but I could say, oh yeah, and by the way, if you've been meaning to join the Clean Waters Association, oh yes, and by the way, you know, just in thing, the Clean Waters Association is meeting tonight in Moulton Borough. Do come if you're interested or curious.
She used to be in the window of the Woolworth store with her program and her mic and things like that. Every time I passed by she'd bang the window, come on in.
I got people in who were interested in health, doctors who cared about it. Not all doctors did, but some did. Lawyers who cared about it, and real estate people who cared about it. They couldn't sell real estate on the edge of the lake that was a sewer. Come on. Got all those people together, got them all talking, gave them a voice interviewed them on the radio. Things are going to happen.
By 1969 or 70, the matter had become much more urgent. And by that time, the Clean Waters Association was actively involved. They were pointing out, from their perspective, that algae blooms were becoming more and more prevalent on Lake Winnisquam, and they naturally felt that at least a considerable part of the problem laid with the city of Laconia and its plant.
This was what the city of Laconia had for a sewage treatment plant. That was the operations building there. And these digesters where the sewage hopefully got treated. And this was a settling tank. But the plant was overloaded and the sewage was going through so fast that none of this really had any effect. Now I think they had a pressure manhole right out there. It may be the same one. And a pressure manhole is a structure in the sewer outfall where it has a heavy, heavy steel cover that's supposed to withstand the pressure and keep the sewage in the pipe. Well, they were running so much sewage through that pipe, it would lift the cover up.
The sewage treatment plant not only treated the sewage, but it also had stormwater coming in, so the storm drains were all connected to it. So when you'd have a big rainfall, 1 or 2 inches, it was way over capacity, and some of the sewage that normally would get treated for 2 hours didn't get treated at all.
5 years ago, I was involved with doing some remainder shut up and close up of this particular building. And what I found was that, and I'd never noticed on the prints, was that there's actually, or was, a bypass valve that worked on a float arrangement that when the flow got high enough in here, it would just open the line and it would go straight out to the lake.
In reaction to the claims of the Clean Waters Association, we did have a PR moment in the sense that we invited the press to visit the current Laconia treatment plant. And To my horror, one of the city councilors scooped up a glass of water from the outflow and proceeded to drink it.
The city of Laconia depends on the lakes for about 30% of its economy. We would be idiots if we did not do something about a problem that would deprive us of that return.
As long as we could get out there and talk to the people, I knew eventually the people would come around.
They had a good reason. Most people in New Hampshire realize how valuable water is to the state. And therefore, it was not hard to put a political base together.
The local newspaper, both newspapers, Union Leader and a Citizen, gave us really good press. They went out of their way to report on these problems, and that helped us a lot.
There was not much communication between Clean Waters and the City Council, nor was there any degree of trust between the two.
The Clean Waters Association got people involved who normally don't show up at hearings, don't go to City Council meetings. You know, you dig into the constituency and you come up with people who heretofore have never been involved in this. And they become activists.
We had people going door to door.
What's that?
Handing out literature. Join the Clean Waters Association. And many, many, many of them did. I think we had a mailing list at one time that was like 600 people. And in some towns, like Winnisquam, it encompassed every single resident around the lake.
They were able to orchestrate and guide what was becoming a community concern around these algae blooms.
We did have meetings all over the Lakes region. Some of these meetings were tremendous in size, almost unbelievable. You know, he could assemble 400 or 500 people at the Margate. That's quite a feat, you know. And he was getting people from Washington, senators, congressmen, whatever, to attend those meetings.
They got a political base, and that's how they got it, really. They had a good, strong political base.
They were posturing in the paper. We were doing the same thing. At one time, they claimed, for example, that I was trying to psych the people of Laconia, that I was trying to, that I was somewhat hysterical in my reaction to the proposed construction ban.
We went to the sewage treatment plant. We got their records in terms of daily volume. I remember looking at those publications, and of course they would go up and down depending on the time of the year and the rainfall. And then we learned, of course, that they were quite frequently overloaded because of storm situations.
He came down here with his young children at that time and sent his children around on a tour with the plant operator. And then while they were out touring with the plant operator, Don got all the books out and made a whole list of how many million gallons a day they were flowing through, which was far in excess of what the plant was ever built for. And that pretty much formed a basis, or it was an important part of the lawsuit we brought against the city of Laconia, because they could not deny that they were putting into the lake far in excess of what they were supposed to, because we had the records.
But you had to surreptitiously get the records?
Yes, we did.
And you used his kids to do that?
Yes, we did.
We went after them on a dollar and cents basis. We said, well, you shouldn't build any more homes and connect any more people to the sewage treatment plant, because the sewage treatment plant from time to time was running beyond capacity.
At some point, the clean water officials came to me and said, we want to sue the city of Laconia, and we need somebody with standing. Will you do it? Will you join the suit? I said, sure. So the very next day, after the suit was filed, the Laconia Evening Citizen came out, James Walker and others, sue the city of Laconia. I saw that headline and I shuddered. There's going to be trouble, and there was.
If you stuck your neck out, there was always somebody there trying to chop it off. There was always somebody there, and especially the city council. You know, they boy, I'm telling you, they used to come, they used to send all kinds of inspectors to inspect my building, what I was doing. They were, all these inspectors would come in and say, Pete, you gotta make this correction, you gotta make that correction. It cost me a lot of money.
My business was in Laconia, and I built a new building in another part of the city, was in the process of moving into it in the winter, and the street was frozen up a lot that winter. And the water company didn't want to dig up the street to give me water because it was so cold. And so I had no bathroom for the employees. And the city engineer came around and says, you got employees, where's your bathroom? I says, they go across the street to the gas station. And he said, I'm looking forward to coming down and putting a big padlock right on your front door.
The government authorities didn't like to get pushed into it. You know, they knew they had a hot potato, and how to get around this thing, how to solve this problem without looking like bad guys. But increasingly, they were beginning to look more and more like bad guys.
So my perspective as mayor was to defend the interest of the city as a whole and to do everything that I could to avoid the possibility that there would be a construction ban, because I knew at best we were talking about an upgrade of a facility that would take 3 to 5 years. And I could not envision the city of Laconia being under a construction ban for that period of time and not being able to build anything within the city.
It was necessary from a standpoint of moving along the problem. It was one item that moved along the problem.
They couldn't deny us anymore. So they did put a limited construction ban on the city of Laconia. And that had a major, major effect, because there were several very large development companies in Laconia who were on the verge of building large projects.
They weren't against cleaning up the sewer system. They were against spending money on it, which is different. And you have to get them to say, well, yeah, I think it ought to be done. Okay, well, how do you think? Well, I don't think we ought to do it the way you're doing it, spending too much money. Well, how do you think we should do it?
Investors and people that were interested in expanding Laconia, building a Brickyard Mountain Inn and that sort of thing, they were being inhibited by the fact that this problem existed. And these nasty people that were upset about the problem weren't going to go away. So what do we do about it? Well, okay, we'll fund this study and see what comes up with the study.
I think that City Council, we were on the defense for a while, but I think we eventually recognized that the issue needed to be resolved, and that's why we initiated the study. Yeah. And from that point on, I think we were proactive.
They hired an engineering firm to take a look at it, and the engineering firm took a look at it not only on the basis of Lake Winnisquam, but on the basis of all of the communities that were involved, and they came up with a series of alternatives. One of the alternatives was the alternative that we bought into. Miles and miles of interceptors taking sewage from all the way up to Center Harbor and piping it all the way down to Franklin.
That was a turning point, because now they could see their way out. Everybody could see their way out. And that's when everybody got together. All of us, for a while, people were at arm's length fighting each other. All of a sudden, they get all together.
The other side of the proposition was to have every one of these little towns come up with its own sewage treatment plant, which would have been disastrous.
The way to do it was to export all the sewage to a major treatment plant that could completely treat it.
After some meetings with local officials and state and other federal agencies, it soon became evident that this was a classic case where handling a project on an individual, isolated basis was not the solution.
Getting any New Hampshire towns to work together is not easy. There are huge differences in demographics. It's always a question of why are we paying for what's going on in the other town, even in school districts that involve multiple towns.
There's no way that any one of those municipalities could undertake a project of this magnitude. And frankly, from a logistical point of view, getting, I don't know how many, 20 or 30 municipalities to all agree on a single plan of action without the rules of the road in place is just about impossible.
The whole deal was that the federal government paid 75% of the cost. The state paid 20% of the cost, and each one of the towns had 5% of the cost, the capital cost, and the state took over ownership of the whole program.
That is absolutely an appropriate job for the highest level of government, because only they have the kind of money necessary to do this sort of a project.
Obviously, the national standards as they're being developed apply nationally. They apply to all emitters of air pollution or of water pollution.
And of course, Ruckelshaus at that time was new in the EPA and was looking for a demonstration project to show people that popular action, local action could solve some of these problems.
Somehow he came into the office and I talked to him about it, and he told me all the things that he had done and how much time and effort he'd put into that. And I was very impressed. Now, this is exactly the kind of citizen activity we're trying to stimulate all over the country.
And we had a major meeting at the Margate. I don't know, probably 300 people maybe. And he announced that this was a project that he wanted to get off the ground. because this was one of the first projects of its nature in the United States, where many municipalities, actually a whole river basin, would get all together and take care of the whole problem all at one grand slam. Anyhow, he announced that he was giving us $1 million grant.
Where we were trying to reward is where the local communities did their part. They took their initiative to get the whole thing going, petitioned us, got us activated to pay attention to that area, and that's exactly the kind of citizen government interaction that we need to be successful.
Then it went to the legislature, and they were able to show them through the studies that they made that it was curable, and this is how you cure it.
The chief architect of House Bill 50, from my perspective, was the Director of Public Works of Laconia, Colonel Frank Denomedy. He was a retired Marine colonel. He was a very knowledgeable individual, and he actually, as I recall, sat down and drafted a good portion of House Bill 50.
And that bill essentially was that all the towns in the southern tier and others in the future would be all in the same system. And it would be starting from Guilford, Laconia, and work its way around the lake. It would be this huge pipeline, go all the way down to Franklin.
The state of New Hampshire, through their state legislature, actually created a state district, as shown by this boundary. And through this mechanism, the state, not the individual communities, is actually building and constructing this entire regional facility and will maintain and operate it.
If they do not make their own cuts in requests for increased spending, the governor's office will make them.
Then, of course, Governor Thompson came along and vetoed the appropriations.
Thompson, he didn't want to spend a dime. He was the thrifty type. He was the thrifty type. He didn't want to spend a dime. And he thought we were crazy.
And he had this big veto stamp. It was about 6 inches long. And he had taken this stamp and stamped it vetoed. He picked it up and he said, I just vetoed the bill on the appropriations. And I thought for a second, I said, boy, are you crazy? I said, well, Governor, I said, first of all, the Teamsters are going to be mad at you. FOL-CIO. I said, then the motel owners in the chamber, the hospitality society. And he sat down, he didn't say anything. He said, well, I don't like to get in a fight of overriding the governor's veto. I said, it'll be nasty. I said, I might be able to do it. I said, but you got legions in the Senate. You can maintain your. He said, a lot of money. I said, no, I know. He says, well, I don't know what to do now. I said, well, I actually didn't ask him. I took the folder, and I said, give me the folder, as I grabbed it. And it was the last page, I ripped it out. And I said, I'll take this with you and I'll be back. He said, what are you going to do? I said, there's a typo in here. I have to get Nixon to sign it again, and I'll sign it, and I'll bring it back to you.
But for the agitation that occurred initially, I'm not sure when the River Basin project would have come aboard. It probably would have eventually, but certainly not within the period of time in which it occurred.
What we have is like 60 miles of main interceptor line, and then you have the towns and cities that pump or gravity feed into our main interceptor. The flow comes in, comes through a flume. We measure the influent flow coming in. We have 2 mechanical bar screens in there that removes any debris, or most of the debris in the wastewater, containing rags, McDonald's toys, anything flushed down the toilet. What happens in a primary clarifier? The wastewater comes in the center of the tank and it works its way to the outer edge. It takes about 2 hours, depending on flow, 2.5 hours. What happens in this tank is roughly 60% of the settable solids settle out to the floor. These are the aeration tanks. This is where everything takes place after the primary treatment. It comes from the primary clarifier, comes through a splitter box, comes into the first bay over here, works its way through to the second bay, and then through to the third bay and out. It comes down over and it's cascaded to put more oxygen in it. Then it goes out into the Merrimack.
There is always a new problem that nobody has thought about that has to be addressed. I got a call, and I think it was from Jim Walker, the essence of which was the governor's office has approved an appropriation in the vicinity of $18,000 for the purpose of giving it to the Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission, which would in turn give it to a pesticide applicator to apply a herbicide called Sewage to control aquatic milfoil, which is a nuisance weed, which, like most algae, it's not algae, but it's like algae. It grows because there are nutrients in the area, and I think it was Upper Moultonborough Bay. And the Lakes Region Clean Water Association was offended by that, rightfully so, because they were concerned that the herbicide would have negative secondary effects and it would not really control the milfoil. I thought it was ironic that the State Water Pollution Control Agency was actually going to pay somebody with state money to dump herbicides into the lake.
To think that chemicals were being put into the lake, which, by the way, is the source of municipal drinking water for the city of Laconia.
There seemed to have been a moment of realization at the Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission that maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And I think it was like a light bulb went off in that agency, which it's not that they had become complacent, because they had their own battles in defending what they were doing. But I think this was one of those things where, we sort of do this as a matter of course, and it wasn't until they were forced to sit down and think about what you're doing here that a kind of a regulatory epiphany occurred. you have to look at this in an historical context. The Lakes Region Clean Water Association was functioning initially at a very early period in the evolution of water pollution control regulation. And because of their activity during that formative time period, they no doubt had an impact on the establishment of and the scope of regulation of sources of pollution, and also on the allocation of money to solve municipal problems.
In retrospect, they performed a valuable service. They did move government. They were instrumental in, number one, bringing the problem to the forefront, and then eventually being part of the solution.
All levels of government have a role, but so does the citizen. And if you can't get the people in the watershed where the problem is, understanding the nature of the problem, committed to its solution, you can't make it. The government can go in there and issue orders to the world looks level, and nothing much will happen unless the citizens demand it and they're behind what the government's trying to do.
If you're having a bad day at home and everything is just bad, and you come up here for an hour and you come out in the lake and you just washes everything away. Just as clean as the lake is, you just wash it away.
I don't know who it was, maybe it was Senator Gaylord Nelson that said that every environmental defeat is permanent and every environmental victory is temporary. And that's basically it. I mean, you just know that you've won today, but tomorrow it could go away, and a change of administrations, change of governors, everything you've worked for goes away. So I guess eternal vigilance is the price of environmental protection.
The battle is not over, because the moment the people get lax, the problems will come up again. No, the problems are never over, and you have to keep after them all the time.
We won't make it without the citizen becoming actively engaged in their own place where they live and taking control of its future, and ensuring that other living things that share that space with them have an opportunity to flourish just as they did. And if they don't do that, no amount of government mandates or control or all the rest is going to cause it to happen.